Okay, so one more video. Probably won't be the last time I say that. But anyway, so this video I want to review adding, using the code value table and the entries in the code value table to build a drop down for your application. This is something that may be useful for the projects. Right, so say something like you're in your courts, right? You want to give a drop down where you pick the court that you want. All right, that can be built from a code type and the code value tables. All right, so I'm going to take a quick look at the database. Right, this is where this is contained. So in the Canes database, all right, I've got code types here. All right, so right now the only thing I have is the user types. All right, so this is the code type. The code type is the sort of the parent table. It has the high level what the types are. So it just tells me that code type 1 contains the user types. If I look at the code value table, you'll see the entries in here have the details about the user types. So there's a row in the code value, see, for code type 1 right now has 3 user types: admin, general, and the idea behind this one was tennis only. I'm going to delete that guy. Okay, so now I've only got 2 user types for my Canes application, admin and general. All right, but what I might want to do is add more code types and code values. So for my Canes camp, I'm going to add the ability to pick a camp type. All right, so there's going to be 2 camp types. There's PD day and summer. All right, so I'm going to run on the CIS admin application. This application, you've seen it. It's in the CIS 2232 2017-2018 repository under we'll go to that repository under the CIS admin application. So it's right here. So if you run this, the idea behind this application is it can administer the code types and code values for your applications and for any applications that have these same database tables. All right, so that is running, I believe. I should be able to hit it. So if I just hit localhost 8080, CIS admin 2, if it's running, yeah, it's running. All right, so what I can do is it's set up to connect by default to the CIS admin 2 database, but I can log in to the Canes database. Test1234 is what all the passwords are for all of our databases. So I don't have to remember a bunch of different passwords. All right, so here's the user types. What I want to do is add a code type of camp type. Or yeah, camp type. So we'll see code type. I had created a couple others in here. So 1, 2, and 3. I created them and then I deleted them. So the next available code type, as far as it was concerned, is code type 4. So anyway, code type 4, which is kind of weird. Let's just change that. All right, so I'm going to go back to the database and look at my code types for this database. I'm just going to edit this guy and put him to 2. Yeah, so that's better. Let's have code type 1 and code type 2. All right, so if I go back, hopefully refresh my code types. Now I've got code types 1 and 2. So you can see how it ties together. So what I can do is click on the hyperlink to the code type. Now take me in to the code values associated with that code type. Alright, so I'm going to add new camp type. So one's going to be PD day. Yeah, and let's call it PD. Alright, so that's code values sequence 3, and that's right because if you look at the code value table. All right, so I've got, see, now I've got a code type 2. This is the first entry I just added. But the code value sequence is sequential right from starting at 1 So PD day is code value sequence 3. All right, so I'm going to add my other guy in here. Summer Haynes camp. All right, so now I've got 2 code values associated with camp type. They're code value sequence 3 and code value sequence 4, and basically they're PD day and summer. So what I want to do is review the functionality I've added to the CamperMVC project to allow me to add, whenever I add a camper, to pick their preferred camp type. So the first thing I have to do is whenever my program runs and I log into the system, I do this. No, that's not what I do. Okay, so what I do is if I've successfully logged in, I want to load the array list of camp types into the session. All right, that's what this code is doing. All right, and this is all checked into the version here. My 2017-2018 part 2. And it's this CamperMVC JPA validation extras from class 8. So this code is all checked in here. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm using my repository, my code value repository, which is another repository just like the camper repository. All right, and it's set up to work with the database. All right, so this method runs, it gives me back all the code values associated with code type 2. Builds me an array list, which I call camp types, and I put that in the session. All right, so once that's in the session, I have the ability to use it on my add page. All right, and that's what's going on here. I've added a tag for a preferred camp type. All right, so what I do is I associate this input field with the camp type attribute of my camper class. Be a camp type down here, which is an int. All right, so what I'm going to store in there is the code value sequence associated with the camp type that's chosen. So it's going to be either 3 for PD day or 4 for summer. All right, so this is the code to do that. I have an option for each one. The value of the option is the code value sequence attribute. Right? I don't want to see that in the application though. What I see is the English description. So whenever I run my program, I'll choose PD day or summer, and then the database will get stored the code value sequence. So let's give that a try. Hopefully it'll work. All right, so I'm going to go back to my application and run the camper project. Okay, so I'm back. The application is launched. I'll log into it. It takes me to the list. You notice this looks a little bit different. On class 8 for MVC topic, you see how to apply, make your table into a bootstrap data table, which gives you a bunch of functionality. And that can also be useful for the projects if you want. It's a very simple process to add that to your application. All right, but we're looking at adding a camper, and you'll see when I go add a camper, all right, it's looped through the code values, and that HTML select has been completed to show the PD day or summer camp. All right, so if I put in go, I can save this guy. All right, let's quickly check the database. Hopefully the information is in there. Alright, so I'm going to look at the campers. Alright, you notice John Doe was just added. His camp type is 4. Alright, you see the data now is not too good for all the rest of these things. The rest of these rows have some invalid data, but that's because I just added they were added before we added the ability to specify the camp type. Alright, so that's great that the data has gone into the database, but you'll notice I'm not seeing the camp type here on the list window. Alright, so that's not so good. So what I want to do is make sure I build the ability to also show the camp type whenever the list is shown. Alright, and there's a little bit of some challenges here associated with this is that, see, my camper class initially built from the database doesn't have a camp type description. So what I have to do is, it does have a camp type, which is an integer, but I don't want to show the integer on the form, right? 3 and 4 doesn't mean that much to me. What I want to show is the description. So either PD day or summer. Alright, so I've added this transient attribute to my camper class. And what transient means is around for a short time. Somebody looked that up for us one day. But anyway, so what this here, if you add this to the camper class, it's okay. Spring won't try to persist it to the database when you try to save a camper because of the transient annotation. Alright, so I've added this to my class. Alright, and whenever, so now when I look at the list window, alright, you see I've added the camp type description as a column showing up on the window, but for some reason it's not being populated. So I'm going to go back to my, say I go to my list for my campers. Alright, so this is the method associated with list. Alright, so why is it not finding them all? Alright, so here it's getting all the campers. But the problem is there's nowhere where we're actually loading. They come back, they've got the camp type would be set coming in from the database, but the camp type description isn't stored in the camper database. Right, so what I have to do is I have to go get the English description associated with the code value, which is identified by this camper's code type, or camp type. Right, so what I want to do is I need to loop through each camper. Right, so for each camper in the list of campers, I need to go get the description associated with that camper's camp type. Sounds not so bad, but alright. And it isn't so bad because the code value table is consistently used throughout a lot of projects. So there's already a code value DAO which will do that for me. Alright, so I'm going to say camper camp type description. I'm going to go to my code value. Code value DAO class dot. Alright, which one of these do I want to use? Get code value. Alright, I pass it a database connection and a code type ID and code value sequence. I could use this method, or I could use the code value repository, which will also go get a description for me from the code value table. All right, so if I want to use, let's just use this one. So I use code value DAO dot code value description. All right, so I need a database connection. What I can do is I just need to create a database connection object. All right, and this is some existing functionality that's built into all these projects. So database connection. What this does is you don't really care too much about what's going on in here. You just we have to know that if I call this default constructor for the database connection class, it will go and read the data access properties file and build me and provide me a connection to my database. All right, so that's going to use whatever is set up in here, not in there, in here. All right, so it's going to give me a connection to the Canes database. All right, so you just need to create an object, pass that to the call to the get code value description method. All right, and in this case, I'm getting the camp type, so I need to tell it the code type associated with camp types, which is 2, and the code value sequence is the this particular camper's camp type. So it's going to be either 3 or 4, except for that invalid data, but we'll fix that later. Camper dot get camp type. All right, so that's going to give me back 3 or 4 for campers that have a camp type specified. And it's going to set the camp type description. The campers now have all their data, but they also have the camp type description populated. One thing I want to do is I want to add a try catch on here, because those guys that have invalid data, they might throw an exception whenever I'm trying to get the camp type description. So I'm just going to catch any exceptions, and if there's an exception caught, I'm going to set the camper. I'll just set it to, all right, it's unknown, right? The data went in before the ability to specify the camp type was there, so I can either fix the data. Well, I should fix the data anyway. All right, so that's deploying. Let's give it a test, and that should be about it. Okay, so it's redeployed. Log in back into my application. Whoa. It's not so good, but that whenever I hit the list, you see it's going and building the right. So it just whenever I hit the camper list, it invoked the functionality that we just wrote, and you see some of these campers had like 0s and 2s set for their camp type, which are not accurate, right? Those are code type descriptions associated with user types. Right, so if I fix these, then the data would look good. But anyway, so what you see what happens is the null threw an exception. All right, so that came back unknown. The others just came back, it couldn't find a camp type description for 2s or 0s, so it just left them blank. Did throw an exception though. And then the one we just added was summer camp. All right, so let's fix this guy. So if I come back and say he's PD day, you notice that when I come back from the edit, it's not loading the camp type. That's only happens whenever I hit the list. So I have to provide, I have to implement the requirement to show the camp type anytime I'm going back to the list page. Right? So I'd have a little bit more work to do that. So whenever I come back from the edit, and this guy's a PD day as well, you see that it loses the camp type. So all I would have to do is add the same functionality here. Copy that and do that same thing. I could create a method to do this. Let's say I add submit a guy. After that, there's where I get my list of campers. Let's load them. already kind of camper here, so it's called. All right, so now whenever I edit a guy, I'll loop through each of the campers in the list and set their camp type description. All right, so once that deploys, I should be able to see that when I edit somebody, the list is also populated. Okay, so that's finished deploying. Now I have the ability to edit a guy. So if I save this guy, see it reloads. Whenever I come back from the edit now, it reloads the camp types as well. So if I hit the camper list, it does. All right, if I delete a guy, all right, you see I still have to add the ability once I come back from a delete to load the camp type. All right, I'll leave it at that. So that's how you can build a drop-down from a code values collection, and also how you can access the code value description associated with a particular code value.